Welcome to Snail Story, where gentle tales drift into your heart like a quiet afternoon rain. Before we begin today, I want to ask you something. Do you believe that sometimes just a hug, small, nameless, with no explanation, could change someone's entire life? That you could step into a moment so ordinary, only to find out later that it was the doorway to something truly extraordinary. Today's story is called "She Hugged a Broken Man at Her Clinic. He was the billionaire, abandoned on his wedding day." It didn't begin with love or fate. It began with a lingering rain in a quiet little town. A woman of veterinarian quiet, reserved, carrying wounds she had never named. And a man wealthy, powerful, standing atop the world, suddenly crumbling on the very day that was meant to be the happiest of his life. They didn't meet at the altar, not at some lavish party, but in a simple embrace beneath the cold rain. No introductions, no names, no promises. And yet, from that one silent moment, a journey began, not easy, not glamorous, but deep enough to heal two hearts that had once shattered. If you've ever believed in small things, a warm glance, a quiet kindness, someone who stayed when everything else left, then this story is for you. And if somewhere in these words you see a part of yourself, don't forget to hit like to help share something beautiful, and subscribe so you won't miss the next tender journey from Snail Story. Now, let's step into this story, beat by beat, moment by moment, as if you were living it yourself. The rain in Bordeaux that day wasn't heavy, but it was relentless siege drop, as thin as a needle threading through the last remaining leaves of autumn. The cobbled streets glistened, reflecting patchy golden lights. People hunched in their coats, rushing home. Only one figure moved quietly across Place du Palais, her coat soaked, arms wrapped around a plastic crate covered with a towel, inside which a small puppy whimpered faintly. Lena Moreau, 31, a part-time veterinarian and volunteer at the local animal rescue center, had just picked up an emergency case from the outskirts. She didn't mind the cold, she was used to it. What she did care about was the tiny life huddled in her arms as she turned into a narrow alley behind the Saint Michel Church. Shortcut to the veterinary center. She suddenly stopped. Someone was slumped in the shadows. A man in a dark suit, drenched, tie askew, head bowed low, his back resting against the old stone wall, shoulders trembling. Lena couldn't hear him cry, but she felt it, the suffocating, silent pain, as though he were swallowing his tears whole. She stood still for a few seconds. The only sounds were the rain and the weakening breaths of the puppy. Then, slowly and instinctively, she set the crate down, covered it with the towel, and stepped forward. "Monsieur," she called softly, her voice slightly hoarse. The man didn't respond, but in the dim alley light she saw his hands tightly gripping a small velvet box, partially open, just enough for a golden glint to escape. A wedding ring? Lena didn't ask. She didn't judge. She knelt beside him, not caring that her knees were soaked through. "I don't know who you are, but I know what it feels like to want to dissolve into the rain," she said, her words as gentle as the wind. Without waiting for permission, she placed a hand on his shoulder. At first, the man flinched slightly, but then, as if something broke inside him, he let go of the box and leaned his head on her shoulder. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with rain, the dampness of the concrete, and something deeply human, raw and real. Lena held him, not too tightly, not too loosely, just enough to let him know that someone was there, present with him in the darkness. As his sobs gradually faded, she gently placed the ring back into his hand, closed his fingers around it. Then she stood up, brushed off her wet jeans, picked up the crate, and turned away, before disappearing around the corner. She glanced back one last time. He was still there, unmoving, but now his hand was clenched, not limp. The next morning, the entire city of Bordeaux was in shock. Newspapers and social media were flooded with headlines. Billionaire Damien Whitlock, abandoned at the altar, bride disappears moments before the vows. The image was of a tall man in a deep blue suit, standing alone in a lavishly decorated yet empty wedding hall. Lena sat in a cafe across from the vet center, a warm espresso in hand. Her eyes scanned the article, and her heart clenched slightly. The face wasn't clear, but the eyes, the posture, the hand unmistakable. It was him. The man in the alley. She set her cup down and sighed. In front of her sat the puppy Nawa, who had survived that rainy night thanks to her embrace and a momentary warmth of a heartbeat. Lena didn't know if she would ever see that man again, but she did know this: sometimes an embrace between strangers is the very path to a turning point no one could ever predict. 3 days had passed since that rainy night. The small veterinary clinic on Rue des Carmes still opened its doors as usual. The familiar blend of antiseptic and pet food filled the air, an everyday scent Lena Moreau had long grown used to. She was jotting down a prescription for a tabby cat when the wind chime above the door jingled. A man walked in, tall, well-kept, dressed in a camel-colored trench coat. In his arms was a tiny, fluffy white dog wrapped in a red scarf, looking as if it had just wandered off the streets. Lena looked up, and for a moment her heart paused. Those eyes, that stance. The man abandoned at the altar, the man in the rainy alley, Damien Whitlock. He recognized her, too, not by her face, but by her eyes. That same warm, deep gaze he had seen in the moment he nearly collapsed. He offered a faint smile. "I think I found the person this one was looking for." Lena rose from her seat, stepped out from behind the counter, and gently took the puppy. It nestled into her lab coat, exhaling softly, as if it knew it had finally come home. She stroked its head and looked up at him. "Did you lose a dog, or did you just happen to lose your way in here?" Damien glanced around the soft golden lights, the low hum of a dryer worry as a Shiba Inu grumbled softly in protest. The space was a world away from the reception halls, boardrooms, and million-dollar decisions he was used to. "Both," he said, half joking, half serious. They sat in the waiting room corner, where there were cat fur-covered cushions and a few old children's books. Lena made him a cup of peppermint Tino coffee, because he looked like he needed something gentler than caffeine. "I recognized you the morning after," Lena said as he took his first sip. "From the news. That headline was everywhere." Damien nodded, letting out a quiet, breathy chuckle. "I guess there isn't a soul in France who didn't see it." "Feels a bit empty, huh?" she asked, gazing out at the soft drizzle. "A bit," he replied. "Kind of like the house I rented to stay in the week after the wedding." Lena looked up, frowning slightly. Because of the story itself, but because of the way he said it, didn't sound like anything she imagined a young billionaire would say after being left at the altar. No bitterness, no defenses. Just a man trying to pack his sorrow into a few short sentences. Not quite knowing where to put it, Damien talked not in detail, not dramatically. The wedding had been planned over a year in advance. The woman, Lois, daughter of a senator, had political ambitions far greater than he'd imagined. "She didn't leave me because she didn't love me, but because I didn't fit the image she needed." Lena said nothing. She quietly poured more tea. After a while, she gently rested her hand on the table. "I was betrayed once the same day. I signed the adoption papers for a disabled cat from the rescue center." Damien raised an eyebrow, not at the story, but at how Lena told it. Calmly, as if that pain had long been archived in a private memory drawer, only opened occasionally to remind herself she'd survived. "He was a journalist," she continued. "Wrote an article criticizing me for adopting a deformed animal. Said I was trying to craft a public image to get funding. Damien stayed silent. This time, there were no light remarks. He simply nodded as if they had just read the same chapter from an old book, and were now a little closer because of the folds in its pages. Before leaving, Damien paused at the door. "I didn't think we'd meet again after that night. I didn't think I'd end up hugging a stranger in the rain." Lena replied with a soft smile. He lowered his head slightly, then held out a business card, simple, ivory-colored, with just a name. D. Whitlock, lately revert, if one day you come across another dog that needs help or a person. She took it. No promises, no expectations, just a quiet nod as if fate were whispering, "This is the beginning." A week had passed since that rainy night. The small vet clinic on Rue des Carmes still opened routinely, filled with the familiar blend of antiseptic and dry pet food and aroma Lena Moreau had long grown used to. She was cleaning the ears of a long-haired cat when the glass door swung open. The wind chime sang its familiar note. He walked in same trench coat, same careful steps, as if afraid to disturb the quiet air around him. This time, he brought along a fox terrier who seemed perfectly healthy. "Could you check his ears for me?" "Ha," he asked casually. "I think he might be having an allergy, or maybe he's just sad." Lena tilted her head. The dog was bright-eyed, wagging its tail gently, as if freshly perfumed. "You adopted him just yesterday, didn't you?" Damien smiled, not trying to hide it. "It's just that this place feels peaceful." And from then on, he came in almost every other day. The reasons varied. A cat that wouldn't stop coughing, a dog that seemed depressed, or sometimes no animal at all. He'd simply stand by the children's book corner, flip through a story, then sit and ask for the same cup of tea. Lena didn't question it. But deep down, she knew. This man wasn't coming for the animals. He was coming for himself. For the stillness of this place, and maybe for her. One afternoon, Bordeaux was bathed in rare sunshine, the soft, golden kind that only appeared a few times each winter month. Damien arrived earlier than usual, stepping in just as the clinic opened. He shyly placed a brown cloth bag on the counter. Inside was a weathered, leather-bound book, Le Petit Prince, Q, 1960s edition. "I found it in an old bookshop. Thought you might like it." Lena took it gently, flipped through a few pages, the scent of aged paper rising delicately. Each line seemed to speak in subtle hints. L'essentiel est invisible pour. Less you, what is essential is invisible to the eye. She closed the book and smiled faintly. "Trying to charm me with children's literature." "No," he replied. "I just hope there's something soft enough here to make someone want to stay." Jade, the blonde assistant and Lena's best friend since residence, seemed entirely sold on this budding familiarity. One afternoon, just after Damien left, Jade sat down next to Lena, propping her feet on the chair. "I know who that guy is. Damien Whitlock, the billionaire who got ditched at the altar. That story practically broke the internet." Lena shrugged. "I know. So what are you thinking?" Lena looked out the window, where a few pigeons preened themselves under the sun-warmed eaves. "I don't know. Maybe I'm not trying to think at all." Jade exhaled, then turned to her, tone more serious. "I know you've been hurt before, Lena. But don't turn the vet clinic into a rehab center for emotionally wrecked men. You think that's what I'm doing? I think you're opening your heart too soon. And that guy, no matter how soulful his eyes look, still the CEO of a soon-to-be listed company. Guys like that don't visit vet clinics just for the tea." Lena stayed quiet. She wasn't offended. Jade's words, though blunt, came from a place of care. But she also couldn't put into words that some connections aren't meant to be defined by logic or labels. That evening, the clinic closed early due to a burst water pipe. Lena stayed behind, organizing medication and cleaning the floor outside. The rain had returned each drop on the zinc roof, slicing through the silence like icy whispers. And then, a a gentle knock on the door. She opened it, not surprised. It was Damien, holding a silver umbrella, his coat speckled with mud. "I know you're closing early today," but he extended a small cardboard box. "I found this by the roadside, a stray kitten. Broken leg." Lena took it, opened the lid, a black-furred kitten, golden eyes, trembling in its nest of tissues. It let out a weak hiss, then collapsed into her hand. No more words were needed. That night, as she splinted the kitten's leg and dressed the wound, Damien sat nearby. He didn't touch any tools, didn't interrupt, he simply sat there, hand resting lightly on the table, close but never quite touching her. When she finished, she looked at him, eyes tired but calm. "You know, sometimes we don't need someone to fix our pain. Just someone who'll sit quietly and not walk away." Damien nodded, his eyes softening. "I won't walk away. Not until I know the kitten's name." Lena chuckled. "His name is Zebra, because he's all black except for one thin white stripe down his back, like a little zebra." Damien leaned in, whispered Zebra, strong and gentle. That night, Lena got home late. On her shoulder was the warmth of Zebra, and in her chest, a swirl of emotions too tangled to name Dot, and in the pocket of her white lab coat, the softened business card, still resting quietly, D. Whitlock, as if waiting for a call not for business, but for a heart that had quietly found its way back more than once. Asterisk on Monday morning. The sky over Bordeaux was gloomy, as if carrying a silent omen. The vet clinic opened, as usual. Lena made tea and checked the appointment book. Damien hadn't stopped by since the previous weekend. It was the first time he'd been absent for nearly 10 days. She wasn't worried.
Exactly.
But there was a strange restlessness inside her. Like something was coming and she wasn't ready for it. The door chime rang. Lena looked up, but it wasn't Damien. A woman walked in. Tall, elegant, with blonde hair tied back in a classic style. A cream-colored trench coat hugged her figure, and her leather boots gleamed. She didn't glance around, but strode straight to the counter as if she already knew the place. "Hello, I'm looking for Damien Whitlock," she said, in perfect French, her tone as delicate as a sad piano melody. Lena frowned slightly. "He doesn't work here." The woman smiled faintly, the kind of smile worn by someone used to commanding any room. "I know, but I've heard he's been spending quite a bit of time here lately." Lena's heart paused for a beat. "I'm Eloise Morel, Damien's former fiancée." She didn't beat around the bush. Eloise openly admitted that after the canceled wedding, she went through a personal crisis. But recently, she had begun to feel regret. "I thought I needed a perfect image to enter politics. Now I realize I may have thrown away the last good thing I had." Lena's grip on her teacup tightened. She didn't know why Eloise had come remorse, a warning, or a preemptive strike. "He hasn't mentioned you," Lena said, her voice unusually calm. Eloise raised a brow slightly. "I'm not surprised. Damien isn't good at expressing feelings. But he loved me once, Lena, enough to put his company projects on hold for 2 months to plan our wedding. If he's spending time with you, it might just be to fill the void." With that, Eloise turned and walked out, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and an unspoken warning that lingered in the air. Lena remained behind the counter, her hands trembling slightly. She had never doubted herself until now. That night, it poured. The clinic closed early. Lena stayed to clean up, her mind in a storm of its own. On impulse, she opened the drawer and pulled out Damien's business card, still folded, the print slightly faded. Is he just filling a void? A simple question, but it struck the softest part of her. The next day, Damien came back. He brought a small box with it. A pet blood pressure monitor Lena had once mentioned they couldn't afford, I thought. "This clinic deserves something better," he said, placing the box on the counter like it was no big deal. But Lena didn't smile. She looked at him long and deep and asked directly, "Do you still have feelings for Eloise?" Damien froze, his hand stilled on the tea box. "She came to see you?" he asked, his voice lower now. "She said, I'm just a placeholder. A temporary umbrella after your storm." Damien looked at her, his eyes open and guarded, but not angry. "She's used to saying what she believes is true. But what she doesn't know is that I've never felt as much peace as I do when I'm with you. Not even when I thought I loved Eloise." Lena stayed silent. "I'm not trying to justify anything," Damien continued, his voice soft. "I'm just trying to understand why a place like this clinic is the one I miss most every time I leave." That evening, Lena stood before her mirror. No makeup, no white coat. Just herself with loosely curled hair and eyes still wet with emotion. She wrote a line on a small piece of cardboard and stuck it on the tea box Damien always used. "Peace isn't the absence of storms. It's where someone chooses to stay in when it's still raining." She wasn't sure Damien would ever read it, but she needed to write it her way of holding on to the faith she once lost. By late March, Bordeaux began to warm with steady sunshine. The kind of rare, unhurried sun that gently dried the cobbled streets and carried whispers of lavender on the breeze from the distant countryside. Lena stood outside the vet clinic, hands on hips, studying the duty roster. From across the street, Jade called out, "Lena, for heaven's sake, take a few days off. You can't live your whole life smelling like cat litter." Lena smiled, and then, as if by coincidence but not quite, Damien appeared, holding a bag of raisin pastries from the corner bakery. "You once told me about Santa Million," he said, handing her the bag. "About your grandmother's little house, the vineyards, and the church bells on Sunday afternoons. Will you take me there?" And Lena nodded. Saint-Emilion was just over an hour's drive from Bordeaux, but to Lena, it felt like a different world. Rolling hills draped in vineyards, stone houses hidden behind moss-covered ochre walls, and gravel paths that led endlessly into the vines. Her grandmother's cottage sat at the end of a slow pond, habited for some time, but everything was still intact. On the wooden shelf, the porcelain cup her grandmother used still sat, and a bundle of dried lavender tied with twine still hung by the bed. Damien stood in the old living room, quietly studying the black and white photos on the wall. "This one is my grandmother. The one who taught me how to clean a cat's wound and make sugar-free plum jam. Seems like you were loved in the gentlest way." Lena smiled softly. "I was. Tea. But she also taught me this. When someone comes back, don't ask why. They stay." 3 days later, they became the oddest pair in the village. Damien, the famous CEO, now bandaging a baby goat's swollen hoof. Lena, the once guarded vet, now bottle feeding a kitten with one hand while wiping sweat from Damien's brow as he fumbled with a pet thermometer. At night, they sat on the porch, sipping orange blossom tea. Lena let Damien read her grandmother's old journal. Its pages yellowed, handwriting slanted with time. She wrote a lot about the war, about people who came and went, but always came back if they were sincere. Damien flipped a page, voice quiet. "If you kept a journal now, what would you write?" Lena glanced at him, half joking, half earnest, "That I'm taking care of a man more clueless than a three-legged cat." They both laughed. The sound blended with crickets, field wind, and the subtle scent of fermenting grapes. But then Damien's phone rang. He looked at the screen, his eyes dimming just slightly. "Sorry, I need to take this." He stepped out onto the porch, listening in silence. Only short phrases. "I understand then, they want to move it up." And finally, "I'll be back before Sunday." When he returned, Lena was putting away the kitten's food bowl. She looked at him, gently. "Work. Shareholders want a meeting. There's an issue with the IPO filings, and the media's poking around the charity fund I'm running." Lena nodded without asking further. She understood he belonged to a different world. A world of numbers, strategies, personal branding, and battles that didn't play out in vet clinics or countryside farms. Damien took her hand. For the first time since they'd embraced in the kitten. "Ah, do you believe that I didn't come here just to run away?" "I do. But I'm not sure there's a place for someone like me in your world." That night, Lena stayed awake in the old room. She reopened her grandmother's journal and paused at a line. Written in darker ink. "Some people don't come to stay but to remind us that our hearts still feel. And if they return, don't hold them with your hands. Hold them with your heart." The next morning, Damien left. No rush, no drama. He hugged her gently, for a long moment, as of one embrace. "Could say everything. I'll come back." Lena stood watching his car disappear behind the vineyard trees. The old neighbor woman came out, pressed a handful of dried grapes into her hand, and chuckled. "That man looks like he's had every volt drained out of him. But when he looks at you, it's like he's been recharged." Lena smiled without replying. She wasn't sure if Damien was a passing breeze or someone who would stay. But she knew one thing. If I open my heart again at least this time, it's because I want to. Not because someone promised they'd stay. Damien left Saint-Emilion early Sunday morning. The sky was foggy. Lena stood on her grandmother's porch, holding Zebra the kitten who had just recovered from a fever. Damien turned back one last time, his gaze deep and searching, as if trying to etch this moment into memory. He didn't make promises. He simply said, "I'll come back. Just a few days." Lena nodded. She didn't ask when. She wanted to believe not in words that could change, but in the look he gave her. But a few days became a week, then 10 days. During that time, no messages, no calls, only headlines thick and constant across the media. Billionaire Damien. Whitlock unveils new IPO strategy. Charity lately avert under scrutiny for alleged use of personal relationships as PR leverage. Young CEO and the mysterious woman behind his philanthropic efforts. Who is she? Attached was a blurry photo, Lena cradling a kitten at the vet clinic, clearly taken from afar. The caption read, "Who is she?" The small-town woman charming her way into the world of high finance. When Jade stormed into the clinic holding a folded newspaper, she slammed it onto the table without hesitation. "Lena, you need to read this before it gets worse." Lena silently picked it up, eyes scanning each line. Beneath the photo was a detailed breakdown of the questionable connection between a local veterinarian and the CEO of a company preparing for a multi-million euro IPO. "I've become a tool," she whispered, almost to herself. The next day, Damien came back. The clinic had barely opened when he walked in dark coat, pale face, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "I tried to handle everything before coming back. But the media moved faster than I could." Lena said nothing. "I never gave them your name. I don't know when they took that picture. Everything I kept quiet was to protect you from this, but you still let them write about me like I'm a prop in your business story." Her voice was steady, not loud, but sharp. Damien stepped closer, but she took half a step back. "I trust you, Lena. And I don't know what I am to you." "What do you mean?" She turned away, her eyes glassy but dry. "I don't want to be loved like someone you're trying to save. And I don't want to be kept around like a cute piece in a corporate portfolio. I just want to be seen as myself, with flaws, a past, and wounds that haven't healed. You think I haven't done that?" Damien asked, his voice trembling. "I think you've never really learned how to love someone without trying to fix them. I don't need fixing. I need to be heard." Damien stood there for a long time, silent. Finally, he pulled a small word memory card from his coat pocket, a draft of a short film his media team had created for the IPO campaign. In it, There was a segment showing Damien at the clinic, feeding cats. Talking to Lena did it to craft the perfect brand story. I canceled the whole campaign this morning. The IPO too. Why? Because if I have to trade the most honest thing I've ever known for a few lines in a valuation report, I'd rather start over. That day, Lena didn't respond. She simply said, I need time. Not to run away, but to understand what I truly want. That night, in the small back room of the vet clinic, Lena picked up a pencil and wrote on the back cover of The Little Prince, the book Damien once gave her. What is essential is invisible to the eye, but it also can't be felt by the heart. If that heart has been hurt too many times, she closed the book and placed it back on the shelf. And the next morning, she didn't go to the clinic. Instead, she boarded a train to Paris to visit a nonprofit she had once dreamed of working with. Les Voix, a center that cared for both stray animals and people with disabilities through shared therapeutic environments. Not to leave Damien behind, but to remember that she had a world of her own before anyone else walked into it. Damien didn't call. He didn't look for Lena right after she left, not because he didn't want to, but because, for the first time in his life, he understood her silence was a language, and he needed to learn how to listen. A week later, he walked out of his corporate office. He left behind the IPO projections, the advisors, and the disappointed shareholders. On his desk, he left a handwritten note. I used to think success meant controlling everything, but the most precious things only exist when you let go. Damien moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of Bordeaux. No driver, no assistant. He did everything himself awkwardly, but sincerely. Then he started researching the things Lena once told him about community initiatives, about the pet and soul model where therapy animals were connected with autistic children or lonely elders. He didn't do it to impress her. He did it because he knew that's what made Lena's eyes light up every time she spoke about it. 3 months later, on a late summer afternoon, Lena was helping Les Voix host a storytime event for children in a small square near Montmartre. A curly-haired girl read a picture book to an old Labrador resting its head in her lap. Lena smiled, but the emptiness inside remained its name clear. Damien. That night, she received a short email. No images, no promises, just a subject line, L'Abri, a place to shelter, and the message, not a shelter from the rain, not a place to hide, just somewhere fragile, things get healed, you'd like to come see. Below was the address of a small center in the Dordogne region. A week later, she went. Amid whispering oak and pine trees was a warm, simple wooden retreat. At the entrance, a hand-carved sign on a burnt wooden plank read, L'Abri, every creature deserves to be loved. Lena stepped inside. Children were reading aloud to puppies. An elderly man was learning to hold a spoon with his left hand, while a tailless cat curled peacefully in his lap. In a far corner, Damien was sweeping leaves. Shirt sleeves rolled up, back damp with sweat. Face unadorned by prestige or polish, only the present moment. He saw her, paused. Didn't rush over, just smiled. I had a feeling you'd come. Lena stood still for a moment, then walked toward him. She looked around, then asked, You did all this because of me? Damien shook his head, his voice low. No, I did it because you helped me see it was something worth beginning. They sat on the wooden steps beneath leaning pines. Damien told her about the months he spent starting over. It's not easy for someone like me to be rejected and still choose to stay. But what you left behind wasn't sadness. It was direction. Lena turned to him as clear for the first time without doubt. I used to think if I disappeared, you'd go back to your old world. But you didn't. Because for the first time, I knew where home really was. They didn't call it a reunion. They didn't label it. They defined nothing. But the next day, Lena returned with her old backpack, the little prince. And Zebra the cat, now fully healed 1 month later labor, became a small, bright dot on the map of places where healing happened through human-animal connection. Children read to pets. The elderly did physical therapy with cats. Those who had hit rock bottom found their first flicker of light not from doctors, but from the silent comfort of a non-judgmental creature's embrace. Damien kept sweeping paths, fixing faucets, scraping moss off rooftops. Lena scheduled therapy sessions, wrote reports, and sometimes fell asleep in the office with a cat curled up on her chest. One evening, as they sat drinking tea under the porch roof, Lena asked, "If I hadn't hugged you that night in the rain, would anything have been different?" Damien looked at her, eyes soft. "I'd probably still be rich, but I'm not sure I'd still be alive. At least, not in the way that matters." Asterisk that early morning, dew still clung lightly to the wet grass surrounding Labrie. Lena had just finished feeding the cats when she heard a knock on the wooden door, not loud, not urgent, just 3 soft taps, tap, 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 like someone waiting for permission to enter another world. She opened the door, and her heart clenched instantly. A boy, no more than 6 years old, tousled brown hair, dust on his cheeks, clutching a torn fabric backpack. Beside him, a woven basket, inside of which was a tailless cat shivering, but still trying to lick the boy's hand as if to comfort him back. No adult in sight, no note except for a folded piece of paper, taped hastily to the basket's handle. "His name is Milo. He's afraid of loud noises. As for me, I can't keep him anymore." No signature, no contact information. Lena knelt down to the boy's eye level. "What's your name?" He stayed silent, only gripped the backpack straps tighter. "Are you hungry?" she asked gently. The boy nodded. 3 hours later, he sat at the wooden kitchen table with a bowl of hot noodles and a glass of milk in front of him. Milo the tailless cat lay beneath the chair, not leaving his side for a moment. The boy ate slowly, carefully, not a word spoken. But each time Lena passed by, his eyes quietly followed her, not guarded, just unsure of who to trust. Damien returned that afternoon, after a quick meeting with the architect team renovating the animal shelters. The moment he stepped into the courtyard, he froze. There was a small boy drawing something on the stone path with a stick. The boy looked up. Milo ran over, nuzzling Damien's leg like a proper hello. "He's Milo's friend," Lena said, walking over, and the boy no one knows his name yet. "I'm waiting on a missing child report from the local police." That night, they set up a small mattress in the reading room, the one with a round window and soft yellow light. The boy curled under a fleece blanket. Milo curled close beside him. They both slept soundly, as if they'd lived with fear long enough to recognize when a place was finally safe. The next morning, when Lena brought bread into the room, the boy was already awake. He held a copy of The Little Prince, lips silently mouthing each word. He stopped at one sentence, then looked up. "My name is Leo." She paused. "Leo." He nodded, in a voice barely above a whisper, like the lion. "But I don't roar. I just stay quiet." From that day on, Leo became an inseparable part of Labrie. He followed Lena on dog vaccinations, helped Damien cut grass, though he always scrunched his nose when trimming hedges. He learned to write his name in rounded letters. And every night, he read a passage from The Little Prince to Milo as if it were a private healing ritual. But there was one thing Lena and Damien both noticed: even if Leo never said it out loud, he was afraid of being left behind. He panicked. When Damien left the grounds without telling him, he went completely silent if Lena turned off the lights without saying goodnight. And he always asked, "There will still be breakfast tomorrow, right?" One evening, Lena gently asked, "Would you like to stay here forever?" Leo looked up, serious beyond his years. "If Milo can stay, then I'll stay too." Because Milo doesn't have anyone, and I don't want to leave him ever again. Damien stood on the porch, hearing those words. His hand gripped his teacup just a little tighter. He had never thought about being a father, but in that moment, something soft and wordless bloomed in his chest. A week later, Lena got a call from the police. No one had come looking for Leo. No one had filed a report. Records showed his mother had been evicted due to domestic violence. As for his father, unknown. Cold. Brief, she hung up. And for the first time, she didn't feel angry at the system. She just saw one thing clearly. We're the only home Leo has. That evening, Damien walked into the kitchen as Lena was baking bread for the next day. He was quiet for a while. Then said softly, I want to file temporary guardianship papers for Leo. If you agree, not out of duty, but because I've seen you. Every day gentle the way your grandmother once was. Lena looked at him, paused for a few seconds, then nodded. And I've seen a father, not someone who knows what he's doing, but someone always willing to learn from scratch. That night, as Leo slept soundly in the reading room, clutching Milo and the little prince, Lena and Damien stood outside the door, watching through the sliver of light. Neither said a word. Because they both knew family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's simply the people who choose to stay. September in Dordogne brought a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine wood and fallen apples along the dirt roads. At L'Abri, the air softened. Children wore light sweaters. The animals began seeking warmer corners to curl up in. Leo turned 7 on a quiet Sunday morning. He asked for nothing but a breakfast with Milo-shaped pancake scat ears and all clumsily made by Lena. But full of care, Damien sat beside him, helping him write thank you cards for the volunteers. Leo wrote carefully, slowly. Then he turned and asked, almost casually, Mama Lena, was I ever in your belly? The question dropped like a delicate leaf, landing at the center of the heart's still water. Damien froze. Lena tensed for a brief moment. She knelt down, eye to eye with Leo. Gently, no. Leo, you didn't grow in my belly, but you grew in my heart, bit by bit, starting from the moment you knocked on L'Abri's door. Leo tilted his head, thinking. Then asked, so, who had me in their belly? That night, after Leo had fallen asleep, Lena sat alone in the reading room, the small desk lamp casting her shadow long across the wooden ceiling. In her hands was the folded note, the wand the boy had arrived with. His name is Milo. He's afraid of loud noises. I can't keep him anymore. Back then, her focus had been on Milo. But now, rereading it, something clicked. The I in that note was Leo's mother. A woman forced to leave her child with the one creature he was most bonded to and vanish from the world. Lena didn't resent her, because she, too, had learned what it meant to let go, not because you didn't love, but because you had no other way to hold on. She had lost both her parents and grandmother in an accident as a teenager. She had once declined adopting another child because at the time, she could barely afford to care for a 3-legged cat. She had never told Damien those things until that night they sat on the back porch of the center, warm lights glowing behind them, darkness thick in the trees ahead. Today, Leo called me Mom, she said softly. Damien turned toward her, not touching her, just resting his hand nearby close enough for her to feel he was there. I used to think I wasn't good enough to be a mother. Not steady enough, not patient, not strong. And now I still think that sometimes. But Leo makes me want to try again. Not to fix anything, but because every time he calls me Mom, I feel like I'm becoming a little better than the day before. Damien smiled, eyes on the trees. Being a dad feels the same. Some mornings I still worry I'll mess up tying his scarf, right? But then he runs over, hugs me tight, and says it looks great. And suddenly, Instructions don't matter anymore. The next day, Lena took Leo to the local bookstore. He picked out a book titled Together, but not the same. The cover showed a small penguin standing beneath the wing of a bigger one. One was blue, the other gray, but they faced the same direction. At checkout, Leo turned to the shopkeeper. "Ma'am, two penguins don't look the same, but they go everywhere. Together, are they still family?" The shopkeeper chuckled, patting his head. "Family isn't about being the same, sweetheart. It's about never leaving each other behind." That night, Leo sat in Lena's lap, reading aloud to Milo. Then he turned. "Mom, I used to not have anyone. But now I have you, and Daddy, Damien, and Milo. So can I be the real Leo now?" Not the Leo who got left behind. Lena held him close, tears spilling uncontrollably. "You've always been the real Leo, but from now on, you're the Leo who was chosen by people who never planned to leave." Damien stood in the doorway, quietly watching, and he knew it was time. Time for them to officially become a family. Not just on paper, but in every look, every word, and in every choice to stay through seasons, through days, and through questions that broke the heart open just enough to let the light in. One October morning, the usually quiet center of L'Abri was unusually lively. Not because of a new patient. Not because another stray dog had been rescued, but because today a small ceremony was taking place. No grand wedding, no lavish floral backdrops, just an old stone courtyard with a few woven rugs. A wooden table lined with warm bread and honey apples. Beneath the shade of the old pine tree where Leo once read The Little Prince to Milo, Lena and Damien would say to each other, "From now on, we no longer walk alone." The idea to hold the wedding here came from Leo. One evening, he drew a picture of their family in crayon, a messy-haired mom, a long-armed dad hugging them all, a tailless cat, and a boy named Leo with a heart as big as the sun. "I want to stand next to you when you get married, not like a guest, but like your." Kid Damien and Lena looked at each other. No words were needed. The guests were purely those who had been part of their journey of healing. The elderly man who once suffered from depression, now doing morning yoga with his cat. The young woman once crippled by anxiety, now caring for animals alongside new patients. Even Jade, Lena's best friend, came from Bordeaux in a simple gray dress, carrying a tiny chihuahua, whispering, "I never believed in love. But if it's you, I do." Lena wore a simple ivory dress holding a bouquet of dried lavender. Damien wore a charcoal suit, his tie slightly crooked tied by Leo. The boy stood between them, eyes more serious than any official witness. Milo lay at their feet, wearing a small purple body. "Damien Whitlock," Lena said, voice soft but steady. "I once held you not knowing who you were, but from today on, I want to hold you because I know exactly who you are. Not perfect, but enough for me to choose to stay. Every day." Damien smiled, eyes glistening. "Lena Moreau, you entered my life as a stranger. But you reached the place no one had ever touched. I've built many things. But from now on, I want to build only one, a place where you and Leo always feel safe." Leo handed them the ring's simple silver bands, engraved inside with one phrase, "L'Abri, the place we found each other." No one sobbed loudly, just a few teary eyes, a few hands held tighter, a few shared glances as if everyone knew this wasn't a beginning. It was a recognition of a path they had quietly walked together for so long. After the ceremony, when most guests had gone, Lena, Damien, and Leo sat on the wooden steps of the porch. Milo sprawled beside them, his tailless back twitching gently. In the evening breeze, "I still can't believe Dad Damien got left at some huge fancy wedding without anyone hugging him," Leo said, half teasing. Damien burst into laughter, ruffling Leo's hair. And if your mom hadn't hugged me in the rain, I'd probably still be that sad guy standing next to a flower bed somewhere. Lena gave him a mock glare, then leaned gently against his shoulder. The late sunlight filtered through the pines, casting long golden shadows across the warm earth. In the distance, a group of children read books to dogs. An old woman walked slowly across the yard, holding hands with a three-legged cat. Damien gently squeezed Lena's hand and looked at Leo. "Do you know why your mom named this place L'Abri?" Leo shook his head. Because in French, L'Abri means shelter. Not just for people, but for hearts that once believed they didn't deserve love. Lena added softly, "But now we're no longer hiding. Now we're living." And that was the story of Lena and Damien. A single hug seemingly meaningless connected two people from completely different worlds through an invisible thread called trust. Not trust in fate, but trust in the goodness of people. Maybe we don't get to choose where we begin. Maybe we can't avoid the cracks in our hearts, but there is always someone patient enough to sit beside us, not to fix us, but to exist with us through the days that still ache. Today's story wasn't just about love. It was a gentle reminder that family doesn't have to be tied by blood. Love doesn't always need a reason. And happiness sometimes begins with the simplest, most unexpected thing: a hug in the rain. If you've ever had a moment that changed you, a person who showed up when you were at your lowest, or a hug that made you feel less alone, leave us a comment below. We read every one, and we listen just as Snail Story was born from souls that understand each other. And if this story touched something in you, share it with someone who might be searching for a place to begin again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next story, because who knows, one of them just might be yours. Thank you for listening. We'll see you again in the next quiet, kind thing.